They had the fame, the fortune, and the love of millions. But in the high-stakes world of country music, one wrong word, one reckless choice, or one scandal too many can turn applause into silence overnight. These aren't just cautionary tales. They're the shocking stories of artists who went from being Nashville's darlings to the most hated names in the business. From jaw-dropping betrayals to career-ending meltdowns, these 12 country stars didn't just lose the spotlight, they burned the stage on their way out. The Dixie Chicks. At the turn of the millennium, the Dixie Chicks were more than just a country group. They were a cultural phenomenon. Natalie Maines, Emily Robison, and Marty McGuire had taken Nashville by storm with their infectious blend of bluegrass, pop, and unapologetic sass. Their albums shattered records, with Wide Open Spaces and Fly selling in the tens of millions. They dominated the CMA Awards, cleaned up at the Grammys, and packed arenas worldwide. Their fan base wasn't just loyal, it was devoted. To many, the Dixie Chicks represented a fresh, fearless energy in a genre often bound by tradition. But in March 2003, with the U.S. on the brink of the Iraq War, that image would shatter. During a concert at London's Shepherd's Bush Empire, Natalie Maines paused between songs and, in a moment that seemed casual at the time, delivered a line that would echo across the Atlantic. "We're ashamed the President of the United States is from Texas." It was a political statement, but in the hyper-patriotic climate of post-9/11 America, it was seen by many as a betrayal. And worse, it was said on foreign soil. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Country radio stations began blacklisting their music within hours. Longtime fans, many of them deeply supportive of the war effort, staged public protests, smashing Dixie Chicks CDs with tractors in parking lots. Talk shows and conservative commentators tore them apart nightly. Death threats poured in, forcing the group to ramp up security. Their once unshakable grip on country airwaves crumbled. Stations that had once played their songs on repeat refused to touch them. The Chicks attempted to weather the storm. In interviews, they stood by their right to free speech while expressing disbelief at the scale of the backlash. But the damage to their career within the country industry was irreversible. Their 2006 album, Taking the Long Way, won 5 Grammys, including Album of the Year. Yet country radio still shut them out. By then, they had stopped trying to win back Nashville's approval, pivoting toward a broader, pop-leaning audience, and eventually rebranding as the Chicks. Even today, their story is cited as one of the most infamous career implosions in modern country history. One sentence, spoken in a moment of candor, had set off a cultural firestorm, transforming 3 of the genre's brightest stars into its most controversial outcasts. 2. Morgan Wallen. For a moment, it seemed like Morgan Wallen was untouchable. With his tousled hair, laid-back swagger, and blend of modern country and heartland rock, he was the genre's hottest rising star. His 2021 album Dangerous, the double album, was smashing streaming records. His singles dominated both country and pop charts. And his fan base, young, loyal, and fiercely vocal online, was growing by the day. Wallen was the face of a new generation in country music, and Nashville was betting big on him. But that image unraveled in the blink of an eye. In February 2021, TMZ released a video that would send shockwaves through the industry. In it, a visibly intoxicated Wallen, returning home after a night of partying, casually used a racial slur while speaking to friends. The backlash was immediate. Within 24 hours, his label, Big Loud Records, suspended his contract indefinitely. Country radio, the very backbone of his success, pulled his songs from rotation en masse. Major streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music removed him from curated playlists. Even the Country Music Association distanced itself, declaring the incident unacceptable. The controversy was compounded by the fact that this wasn't Wallen's first brush with scandal. Just months earlier, in 2020, he had been caught violating COVID protocols while partying maskless in crowded bars, a stunt that got him disinvited from Saturday Night Live. The racial slur incident, however, was far more damaging. For many in the industry, it wasn't just bad behavior. It was a line that could not be crossed. Wallen issued multiple public apologies, including a video message acknowledging the harm of his words and pledging a $500,000 donation to Black-led organizations. Yet the apologies did little to win back certain industry gatekeepers. His critics argued that his rise after the scandal, Because rise he did, proved that the country music world was willing to overlook racism if the money kept flowing. And flow it did. Dangerous returned to the top of the Billboard charts for weeks, fueled by a fan base that saw the backlash as cancel culture gone too far. In the years since, Wallen has slowly re-entered the mainstream, regaining radio play and winning awards. But the stain of that night in February remains. For many, he's a cautionary tale about how fame can be jeopardized in a single reckless moment, and how public redemption in country music is as much about loyal fans as it is about sincere change. 3. Billy Ray Cyrus. In the early 90s, Billy Ray Cyrus was a country music sensation unlike anything Nashville had ever seen. His debut single, Achy Breaky Heart, exploded in 1992, turning the Kentucky native into a household name overnight. The song's infectious hook and the line dance craze it inspired propelled his debut album, Some Gave All, to sell more than 9 million copies in the United States alone. With his rugged good looks, signature mullet, and everyman charm, Cyrus seemed destined for a long, steady run at the top. But as quickly as he rose, cracks began to form. Some critics dismissed Achy Breaky Heart as a novelty hit, and Cyrus struggled to shake off the one-hit wonder label. His subsequent albums failed to match the success of his debut, and whispers began circulating in Nashville that his ego had grown faster than his artistry. Industry insiders claimed he became difficult to work with, ignoring advice from producers and alienating peers. By the 2000s, his career had shifted more toward acting, with a role in the TV show Doc, and later as the on-screen dad to his real-life daughter Miley Cyrus in Disney's Hannah Montana. While the show revived his visibility, it also altered his image. Instead of a respected country hitmaker, he was now seen by many in Nashville as a pop culture personality riding his daughter's coattails. As Miley's career took off, and her own controversies dominated headlines, Billy Ray's involvement in her career sparked accusations that he was exploiting their family dynamic for attention. In recent years, personal drama further eroded his reputation. His highly publicized divorce from longtime wife Tish, followed almost immediately by his marriage to a woman decades younger, drew criticism from fans and tabloids alike. Stories of strained relationships with his children, especially Miley, only fueled the narrative that his personal decisions had overshadowed his music. While Billy Ray Cyrus has continued to release music, even scoring a massive crossover hit in 2019 with Lil Nas X on the Old Town Road remix, the public perception of him has shifted dramatically. To some, he's a survivor who's weathered the ups and downs of fame. To others, he's a case study in how ego, questionable career moves, and messy personal choices can chip away at even the most promising legacy. Billy Ray once stood as a proud symbol of 90s country glory. Today, his name often sparks more discussion about scandal and spectacle than the groundbreaking debut that made him a star. 4. Mindy McCready. In the mid-1990s, Mindy McCready was the definition of a country music golden girl. Her debut album, 10,000 Angels, 1996, went double platinum, and her hit singles, including Guys Do It All the Time, showcased not only her powerhouse voice, but also her playful, confident persona. She was young, beautiful, and brimming with promise. Critics hailed her as one of the brightest new stars in Nashville, and fans were eager to watch her career soar. But behind the scenes, McCready's life was beginning to spiral. As her fame grew, so did the pressures of the spotlight. By the late 90s, her music career had already begun to stall. Follow-up albums sold poorly, and her label grew frustrated. Rumors swirled of clashes with producers and an increasingly erratic personal life. Then came the legal troubles, arrests for drug possession, probation violations, and driving under the influence. Each incident chipped away at her image and further alienated the industry. McCready's romantic relationships became tabloid fodder, none more infamous than her long-term affair with baseball star Roger Clemens, which allegedly began when she was just 15 years old. The scandal exploded in the press, overshadowing any attempt she made to revive her career. Public sympathy waned as McCready's name became synonymous with chaos, and Nashville, an industry that thrives on carefully curated images, quietly distanced itself from her. Her personal struggles were tragically intertwined with substance abuse and mental health battles. In 2005, she was hospitalized following a suicide attempt after a violent incident with an abusive boyfriend. In the years that followed, McCready made multiple public attempts at comebacks, even appearing on reality TV shows like Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew. But each attempt was derailed by fresh controversies, new arrests, or renewed public scrutiny of her troubled past. By the 2010s, her career was effectively over, yet her name still made headlines, not for music, but for tragedy. In 2013, just weeks after the death of her boyfriend David Wilson, McCready died by suicide at the age of 37, leaving behind 2 young sons. Her passing was a grim reminder of the price fame can exact, especially when paired with unresolved trauma and relentless public judgment. Mindy McCready's story is one of country music's most heartbreaking downfalls, a cautionary tale of how talent and beauty can be overshadowed and ultimately destroyed by a maelstrom of personal demons, toxic relationships, and an industry that often turns its back when the spotlight fades. 5. David Allan Coe. If outlaw country had a wild child, it was David Allan Coe. Emerging in the 1970s, Coe embodied the raw, rebellious spirit of the outlaw movement, alongside legends like Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson. His gravelly voice and gritty songwriting, often drawn from his own turbulent life, earned him both critical acclaim and a fiercely loyal cult following. Hits like You Never Even Called Me By My Name and The Ride made him a fixture in country music, while his larger-than-life persona fueled his mystique. But Coe's defiance often tipped into outright self-destruction. From the beginning, he courted controversy with songs that were too explicit, too provocative, or simply too offensive for mainstream airplay. His X-rated albums of the 1980s, filled with raunchy and racially charged lyrics, became infamous in underground circles, but alienated him from radio and record executives. While some fans saw it as fearless authenticity, others viewed it as a deliberate act of sabotage against his own career. His behavior off stage was just as combustible. Coe developed a reputation for being unpredictable, combative, and difficult to work with. Stories circulated of volatile encounters with promoters, erratic performances, and public feuds with fellow musicians. He seemed to thrive on pushing buttons, even if it meant burning bridges in the process. By the 1990s and 2000s, Coe was more known for his controversies than his music. His open use of Confederate imagery in songs accused of containing racist overtones drew heavy criticism, especially as the cultural conversation around race shifted. While Coe denied being racist and defended his work as satire or shock art, the explanations did little to repair the damage to his public image. Many in Nashville simply stopped inviting him to the table. Financial troubles and legal disputes further eroded his reputation. Coe filed for bankruptcy in the early 2000s and was involved in lawsuits with former business associates. Despite occasional flashes of brilliance in songwriting and live performances, the industry had largely moved on, leaving him to tour smaller venues for his devoted base of fans. Today, David Allan Coe stands as one of the most polarizing figures in country music history. To his admirers, he's a no-compromise outlaw who refused to play by Nashville's rules. To his detractors, he's a cautionary tale of how unchecked ego, inflammatory art, and an inability to adapt can turn a promising career into a decades-long exile from the mainstream. 6. For decades, Randy Travis was the embodiment of country music class. With his deep, resonant voice and heartfelt storytelling, he helped lead the neo-traditional country revival of the 1980s. Albums like Storms of Life and Always and Forever produced timeless hits, Forever and Ever, Amen, Deeper Than the Holler. On the other hand, songs that cemented him as one of Nashville's most respected and beloved figures. He won Grammys, CMAs, and the admiration of peers and fans alike. By the early 2000s, he was even branching into gospel, adding another layer to his legacy. But in 2012, the image of Randy Travis as country's gentleman took a shocking turn. That summer, he was arrested for public intoxication after being found in his car outside a Texas church, an incident that seemed more sad than scandalous at the time. Yet just months later, things escalated. In August, police discovered Travis naked, intoxicated, and combative after he had crashed his car. He was charged with driving while intoxicated and threatening law enforcement officers. Dashcam footage of the arrest spread online, turning the incident into a tabloid spectacle. For fans who had known him as a wholesome, clean-cut star, the mugshots and arrest reports were jarring. This wasn't the Randy Travis they remembered, the man who sang gospel hymns and heartfelt ballads. The media frenzy only intensified as more details emerged, including his messy divorce from wife and longtime manager Elizabeth Hatcher, which had already raised eyebrows with accusations of infidelity, financial disputes, and bitter legal battles. In the years that followed, Travis faced additional run-ins with the law, including an assault charge after a drunken argument in a Texas parking lot. His health began to decline dramatically. In 2013, he suffered a massive stroke that nearly killed him and left him with severe speech and mobility challenges. Though the country community rallied around him in his recovery, the damage to his public image and the abrupt halt to his career was undeniable. Randy Travis's story is complicated. His downfall wasn't solely the result of arrogance or malice. It was a cocktail of personal turmoil, alcohol abuse, and circumstances spiraling out of control. Yet in the unforgiving spotlight of celebrity, the fall was swift and merciless. Today, he remains a revered figure for his musical contributions, but his legacy carries the shadow of those turbulent final years on stage. The lesson is stark. Even the most respected careers can unravel in an instant, leaving behind a legacy that's forever split between the glory days and the headlines that followed. 7. Leanne Rimes. When Leanne Rimes burst onto the country music scene in 1996 with Blue, she was just 13 years old. Yet her voice carried the depth and control of a seasoned veteran. Critics hailed her as the next Patsy Cline, and audiences were captivated by her pure, soaring vocals and wholesome image. She racked up platinum albums, Grammys, and crossover success, becoming one of the youngest and most celebrated artists in country history. For a while, it seemed her trajectory would be nothing but upward. But the same industry that had embraced her youth and innocence turned sharply when her personal life became public scandal. In 2009, while married to backup dancer Dean Sherritt, Rimes began a highly publicized affair with actor Eddie Cibrian, who was also married at the time. The affair became tabloid gold, with paparazzi capturing every embrace and gossip outlets dissecting every detail. Public opinion turned fast. The once adorable teen prodigy was now labeled a homewrecker and husband stealer. For country audiences, who often value traditional family values, the scandal was unforgivable. Radio play dwindled, concert attendance dropped, and her once unshakable fan base fractured. While Rimes insisted her personal life shouldn't define her artistry, the media frenzy refused to let go. Years later, she admitted the affair had taken a deep toll on her mental health, contributing to anxiety, depression, and a stint in rehab for stress and exhaustion. Her attempts to rebuild her career were further complicated by legal battles with her father over financial disputes, a very public feud with Cibrian's ex-wife Brandi Glanville, and a string of underperforming albums. The constant tabloid headlines overshadowed her music, and even strong vocal performances couldn't fully shift the conversation back to her artistry. In the 2010s, Rimes made deliberate efforts to reframe her image, participating in reality TV, speaking openly about her mental health struggles, and releasing more personal, stripped-down music. While these moves earned her some renewed respect, she never fully recaptured the chart dominance she had in her early years. Leanne Rimes' fall from country music's golden girl to one of its most polarizing figures is a textbook example of how quickly public perception can flip. For some fans, her voice remains one of the finest the genre has ever produced. For others, her personal choices forever overshadow her talent. Her story is a stark reminder that in country music, as in life, reputation can be lost much faster than it's built. And winning it back is the hardest climb of all. 8. Hank Williams Jr. As the son of the legendary Hank Williams Jr. had an almost impossible legacy to live up to. And somehow, he did it. By blending traditional country with Southern rock swagger, he carved out his own identity in the 1970s and 80s, delivering hits like A Country Boy Can Survive, Family Tradition, and All My Rowdy Friends Are Coming Over Tonight. He became a country music institution, beloved for his rebellious spirit, rowdy stage presence, and unapologetic patriotism. But for all his musical accomplishments, Hank Jr. was no stranger to controversy. His public persona thrived on pushing boundaries, yet in 2011, he pushed too far. While appearing on Fox News' Fox and Friends, he compared President Barack Obama playing golf with then House Speaker John Boehner to Hitler playing golf with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. The comment ignited immediate outrage. ESPN, which had used his All My Rowdy Friends theme song for Monday Night Football for over 2 decades, swiftly dropped him. Instead of apologizing and moving on, Hank Jr. doubled down. He released a song titled Keep the Change, in which he lashed out at Fox and Friends and the liberal media, framing himself as a victim of censorship. While this defiance played well to a segment of his fan base, it further alienated more moderate listeners and deepened the divide between him and the broader country audience. The fallout was significant. Though his core fans stuck by him, his presence on mainstream country radio and TV diminished. Corporate sponsors grew wary, and his career momentum slowed. It wasn't the first time his mouth had gotten him into trouble, either. Over the years, he had made numerous inflammatory political statements that alienated parts of his audience. But the 2011 incident marked a turning point from which his mainstream career never fully recovered. To his defenders, Hank Jr. is a truth-teller who refuses to bow to political correctness. To his detractors, he's an example of how arrogance and a refusal to read the room can tank even the most established careers. Either way, his story illustrates a hard truth of the modern music industry. In an age of instant outrage, even legends aren't untouchable. While Hank Jr. continues to record and tour and still commands respect from many for his decades of contributions to country music, his legacy will forever be split between the rowdy anthems that made him famous and the fiery rhetoric that cost him some of his biggest platforms. 9. Toby Keith. In the aftermath of 9/11, Toby Keith emerged as one of country music's most visible and outspoken patriots. His fiery anthem, courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue, the Angry American, became a rallying cry for many Americans, propelling him to superstardom. With a string of chart-topping hits, sold-out tours, and a brash, unapologetic persona, Keith seemed untouchable. His fans loved his confidence, his defiance, and his ability to blend patriotism with swagger. But the very qualities that made Toby Keith a star also laid the groundwork for his downfall in the eyes of many. His blunt political commentary often crossed the line from bold to divisive. Feuds with fellow artists, including a very public and ugly war of words with the Dixie Chicks' Natalie Maines, painted him as combative and unwilling to back down, no matter how much it fueled controversy. While some saw this as admirable toughness, others saw arrogance and unnecessary hostility. Critics accused him of capitalizing on national tragedy for personal gain, pointing to courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue as exploitative. Keith brushed off the criticism, claiming he was simply expressing his beliefs. But his reputation for being combative continued to grow. Media interviews often became sparring matches, and his dismissive attitude toward detractors made him a polarizing figure. By the late 2010s, Toby Keith's chart presence had begun to fade. His newer music struggled to match the commercial dominance of his early 2000s hits. Meanwhile, his strong political stances, including open support for controversial figures, further alienated portions of his audience. In an era when country artists were increasingly cautious about public political alignments, Keith seemed determined to double down, regardless of the cost. Offstage, his business ventures, including his I Love This Bar and Grill restaurant chain, faced lawsuits and closures, adding another layer to the perception of a star whose golden touch was fading. While none of these issues alone destroyed his career, together they painted a picture of an artist who was as well known for his controversies as for his music. To his devoted fans, Toby Keith remains a fearless country icon who never compromised his beliefs. To others, he's a cautionary tale of how pride, stubbornness, and an unwillingness to adapt can erode even the strongest careers. His legacy is now a complicated blend of patriotic anthems, undeniable talent, and the self-inflicted wounds that kept him from maintaining the universal appeal he once enjoyed. 10. Shooter Jennings. Born into country royalty as the son of Wallen Jennings and Jessie Coulter, Shooter Jennings had both the pedigree and the talent to carve his own legendary path. From the beginning, He made it clear he wasn't interested in riding solely on his family name. Instead, he blended outlaw country with southern rock, metal, and even electronic elements, creating a genre-bending style that appealed to fans looking for something beyond Nashville's polished mainstream. Albums like Put the O Back in Country showcased his defiance, creativity, and refusal to fit into a mold. But Shooter's rebellious streak often came at the cost of his relationships within the industry. He developed a reputation for being outspoken to the point of alienating fellow musicians, producers, and even potential fans. His public feuds, especially those where he openly criticized mainstream country stars for being fake or manufactured, earned him as many enemies as admirers. While some applauded his willingness to call out the establishment, others saw it as arrogance and unnecessary hostility, especially toward artists who had never publicly wronged him. One of his most infamous clashes came when he targeted artists like John Mayer and Eric Church in interviews, dismissing their authenticity and questioning their credibility in the genre. These comments made headlines, but also reinforced a narrative that Shooter thrived more on tearing others down than building bridges. In an industry where networking and mutual respect often determine longevity, this made him a risky collaborator. His refusal to play the Nashville game extended beyond words. Jennings frequently bypassed traditional promotional channels, rejecting award shows and mainstream radio in favor of his own fiercely independent path. While this won him a loyal cult following, it also meant he was voluntarily cutting himself off from the very platforms that could have elevated his career to a wider audience. By the late 2010s, Shooter Jennings was respected for his artistry, but largely sidelined in mainstream country. His name carried weight among die-hard outlaw fans, yet for many in the broader public, he was better known for his criticisms than his catalog. Even his undeniable talent as a producer and musician couldn't fully erase the reputation he'd built as a divisive, confrontational figure. To his supporters, Shooter Jennings is a maverick who stayed true to himself and refused to sell out. To his detractors, he's proof that ego, when left unchecked, can be just as limiting as the industry rules he sought to defy. In the end, his career's trajectory reflects the fine line between fearless honesty and self-sabotage, a line Shooter often crossed. 11. Kellie Pickler. Kellie Pickler's rise to fame was the kind of story Nashville loves. In 2006, the small-town waitress from Albemarle, North Carolina, charmed millions as a bubbly, down-to-earth contestant on American Idol. Her southern drawl, wide-eyed humor, and raw vocal talent earned her a devoted fan base. When she transitioned into country music, albums like Small Town Girl and 100 Proof showed she could deliver more than just charm. She had genuine artistry. Pickler became a favorite at award shows, talk shows, and charity events, embodying the image of a wholesome, relatable country star. But as her career progressed, whispers began to replace applause. Behind the scenes, industry insiders spoke of a growing diva streak. Reports surfaced of Pickler being difficult with production crews, canceling appearances at the last minute, and clashing with managers and publicists. Some in Nashville claimed she had grown dismissive of the very fan base that launched her career, citing instances where she appeared aloof or uninterested at meet and greets. The cracks began to show publicly when she made flippant remarks in interviews that came across as ungrateful or condescending. Her once effervescent charm sometimes felt forced, and critics accused her of leaning too heavily on the cute, clueless country girl persona rather than evolving as an artist. This was compounded by a string of underperforming singles and albums, which led labels to lose confidence in her commercial viability. By the mid-2010s, Pickler shifted her focus to television, co-hosting the daytime talk show Pickler and Ben. While the program showcased her warm personality, it also distanced her from the music scene. Some fans felt abandoned, as though she had left country music behind without explanation. When she did release new music, it failed to regain traction. Partly because the industry had moved on, and partly because her public image no longer matched the heartfelt authenticity that country audiences craved. The final blow to her standing among some fans came from her perceived detachment in recent years. Social media, once a direct line between stars and their audience, became a platform where she appeared sporadically, often posting promotional content rather than genuine interactions. For a star whose brand was built on accessibility, this felt like a betrayal to many longtime supporters. Kelly Pickler's story isn't one of a single scandal, but of slow erosion. A career chipped away by strained industry relationships, unmet fan expectations, and a failure to adapt her image as she matured. She remains a recognizable name, but her journey stands as a reminder that in country music, staying connected to your roots and your fans is just as important as talent. 12. Johnny Paycheck. Johnny Paycheck's name is etched into country music history thanks to his rebellious spirit and the working class anthem, "Take This Job and Shove It." In the late 1970s, the Ohio-born singer became a voice for blue-collar frustration, delivering songs with grit, conviction, and an outlaw swagger that resonated with millions. As part of the outlaw country movement, Paycheck's rough edges were part of his charm, a man who seemed to live the hard luck stories he sang about. But those same rough edges eventually became his undoing. Paycheck lived fast, drank hard, and burned through friendships, business relationships, and opportunities. Stories of missed shows, drunken outbursts, and erratic behavior followed him from venue to venue. His reputation for being unreliable was compounded by frequent altercations with promoters and bandmates, making him a risky booking for anyone in the business. By the early 1980s, his personal life was spiraling. Paycheck's battles with alcohol and drugs were no secret, and his finances crumbled under the weight of bad investments, unpaid taxes, and mounting legal fees. The IRS came after him for millions in back taxes, and bankruptcy loomed. But the most infamous incident came in 1985, when an altercation in an Ohio bar turned violent. Paycheck shot a man in the head during an argument, a non-fatal wound, but one that would change his life forever. Convicted of aggravated assault, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison, though he served less than 2 before being paroled. The time behind bars, however, was enough to all but destroy his career. The country music industry, even the outlaw corner that once embraced him, moved on. While he made attempts at comebacks, his days of topping charts and selling out big venues were over. Paycheck's later years were marked by poor health, ongoing financial troubles, and a reliance on small-town gigs to make ends meet. For many, the image of Johnny Paycheck went from defiant outlaw hero to cautionary tale, a man who embodied the dangers of living too far on the edge. Yet, even in decline, there remained a sliver of admiration among diehard fans who saw him as the real deal, someone who lived his songs without compromise. But for the industry at large, his criminal record, destructive habits, and volatile behavior overshadowed his musical contributions. Johnny Paycheck's story is a stark reminder that the outlaw persona can sell records and build legends. But when the line between image and reality blurs too far, the fall can be as spectacular as the rise.